Hello and welcome to Wizards, Warriors and Words, a fantasy writing advice podcast. I'm Jed Herne, author of The Thunder Heist. Rob.
I'm Rob Hayes, author of some books.
I'm Michael R. Fletcher, author of Beyond Redemption, the Manifest Delusion series, which will never be finished, but fuck all you.
That's an exclusive! An exclusive!
You heard it here first.
I'm Dirk Ashton, author of the Paternus trilogy.
And we are joined by Anna Smith-Spark. Anna, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, I'm Anna Smith-Spark, author of the Empires of Dust trilogy, Court of Broken Knives, Tower of Living and Dying, and the House of Sacrifice.
Awesome. And today's episode is going to be our second listener Q&A session. So thank you to everyone who sent in a question, whether that was emailing me or commenting on one of our YouTube videos or some other means that I've forgetting off the top of my head. Yeah, carrier pigeon. That's good as well. Smoke signals too. I'm willing to receive any type of communication format. If you do have any other questions that you would like to send through to us, you can email wizardswarriorswords@gmail.com. The link, that email address will also be in the show notes, and that'll go into our listener question banks for future episodes. But to kick things off, how can you avoid creating a world that is too complicated or unfamiliar and will drive readers away? Asks Cade Kessler. Anna, do you want to maybe start off on this?
Oh goodness, I mean, so I quite like very unfamiliar worlds. Oh god, that's a kind of unanswerable question in some ways. I mean, if you're just making it weird for weird's sake, then I guess there comes a point when you're kind of, it will just become implausible. I think a lot of it comes down, as we were saying in the last episode about prose, a lot of it comes down to your own conviction. If you can carry it off, and you've either got it sufficiently worked out, or you've just got confidence to wing it. It's having that confidence in the world you're creating. So the world I created is the world of Empires of Dust. Is not a coherent world. There's people use bronze weaponry. So there's just little things like people use bronze weaponry, and then sometimes they randomly use iron weaponry, and sometimes they go back to using bronze weaponry. And that kind of, and you have kind of cities from different it's just a kind of weird mishmash of all my favorite historical periods. And kind of So Lost is kind of based on the Silk Road, Samarkand, and Byzantium and Yates's Byzantium. But then the people in the White Isles are kind of based on Dark Age Britain, and then there's some stuff in there which is just straight out of classic high fantasy. And there's all kinds of stuff. There's kind of cavalry charges that are just ripped off Macedonian cavalry charges. I didn't quite put howitzers in there, but kind of. But for me, it's a coherent world, and because what I don't do is spend lots of time trying to justify it. So sometimes we use bronze weaponry because I wanted to use the Homeric stuff about the killing bronze, and sometimes we use iron weaponry because I wanted to talk about stuff like cold steel and kind of iron and that sort of. But what I don't ever do is justify it. I don't feel they ever need to have any kind of explanation for why this whole world just doesn't work or just doesn't actually kind of have any kind of coherence and explain stuff. What I always find actually totally unconvincing in fantasy novels is that bit where someone sits down and kind of, can you just remind me why we celebrate our fantasy version of Christmas? Let's just have a quick chat about the way the currency system works. And that kind of, because no one ever does that, and two, if you think about actually trying to explain to someone, I mean, the classic thing, of course, is the first time you bring a new girlfriend or boyfriend home to your parents for Christmas or Hanukkah or Eid, and you're trying to explain, this is the way my family does it, and they're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. None of this makes any sense. Your family's festival traditions are just nuts, and you're like, no, it's just the way we've always done it. And it's that kind of
great analogy.
Nothing ever makes sense if you try and explain it. As a historian, I've spent years reading books where people try and actually make some kind of sense about things like the ancient Greeks' belief system. There's this famous book, which is by a very, very rational French academic called, Did the Greeks Really Believe in Their Gods? Because he's just like, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, some story about some ranty guy who pursues a woman while in the guise of a swan. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like, no, it doesn't make any sense, does it? And that's that kind of, no culture makes sense. There's a whole genre of xenophobic, like, comedy guides to other countries, the whole point of which are that no country's culture makes sense to anyone outside that country. And that is just going with that conviction. I'm just going to write this world and put these people in it. I'm going to make the world works in your, if the world works in your head and you have the conviction to keep writing it, the world will work on the page. And also, this stuff doesn't matter. No one is ever going to say, but hang on, I'm slightly unconvinced by the economy of this city. Or if they do, they're probably not the really ones.
Great
If they're
point.
really worried about the economic situation in your fantasy country that's being beset by dragons and evil dark lords, they probably should be not reading a book. You see what I mean? I mean,
I think that's part of it. You're never going to please everyone. So
yeah, there's always going to be someone who will pick it apart and say, this is totally, from my vast experience of fantasy worlds being beset by dragons and my vast experience of cavalry charges in heavy armor, I'm saying this is entirely unconvincing.
I think, yeah. From a practical standpoint, make your worlds and your cultures as bizarre and strange as you like. But like Anna said, you don't have to explain it all. It will, as long as you know how it works, it will come through on the page. Two, no matter how strange, bizarre, or different or complex it is, try not to go too far in unfamiliar vernacular, making up vernacular, measurement systems that you make up. I mean, these things work, but you can go too far. The seasons, the amount of seasons, the passage of time, how they tell time. Instead of using hours, they use this. Instead of using that, they use this. That stuff, I think, can throw people out more than anything else. For examples of really strange, bizarre worlds that are done extremely well, I mean, of course, I go back to him a lot because he's one of my very favorites, is Zelazny. Read Lord of Light, read Creatures of Light and Darkness, read Shadowjack. Incredibly strange, bizarre physics and worlds, and things happening, like just kind of mind-blowingly bizarre stuff that makes sense, just because of the way he writes, would be a really good example, I think.
I honestly think, like, you're never really going to create a world that's too weird that there isn't going to be an audience that can connect with it. In the same way that you're probably never going to create a world that's weirder than this one that we live in, that is just utterly bizarre. I tweeted out yesterday, just because it was on my brain. No matter how weird your monster is going to be, just remember that, a muscle is basically a tongue wrapped in armor.
I saw that tweet.
Weird. Like, muscle is weird, and yet it's real. And people eat it. So you're never going to be weirder than real life, no matter how much you really try. And you're never going to be more complex than real life either. And no matter how complex a world you create, as long as you have a handle of what's going on and why, has been said, that, it's okay. As long as it makes sense to you, as long as you've got a handle on everything, it's going to be okay. Just look at, someone like Brandon Sanderson, who his Stormlight Archive world is just incredibly complex, and just there's so much going on in so many different places, and that's part of a larger universe where there's bits going on all over the place. It's so complex, but because he knows where it's all going, what's going on, and everything, it comes across in the page and it all makes sense. So yeah, like, indulge the weird, indulge the complex. Just make sure you've got it right in your head and make it work on the page.
Great.
Somehow.
Mike, do you have anything to add to that? I totally
I
agree.
would go with and fuck, and I think Rob did that pretty well. Good.
Pithy
question.
and concise. Thank you. So we got another question here. This one is probably more of a briefer one. Yasamoin asks, do any of you guys take inspiration from Magic the Gathering or its gameplay for your world
No.
building or magic systems?
Okay, I'd answer this one first because I've recently written a book which is the start of a trilogy, which nobody else has read yet because it's with my agent and he likes it. So hopefully it's gonna find a home soon. But the magic system is very much based on deck type games, like Magic the Gathering, or I used to play like Arkham Horror and even the Game of Thrones card game. I love card games like that, and it's very much that sort of almost like a gamble where you have a deck and you pull something and you don't know what it's going to be. So it might be like, hey, here's a fireball, or it might be like, hey, here's a fish.
That sounds awesome.
So yes, I definitely take inspiration from those sorts of things to the point where I've created a magic system which is kind of like playing that game, not like the world, just like playing that game.
I'm so excited to read that. That sounds awesome.
I missed my internet connection got weird. I missed the question. What was
the question? Was, do any of us take inspiration from Magic the Gathering, the card game, for its gameplay or your world building or magic systems?
No.
Easy.
Just because I've never played, and I'm not an RPG player. Not that I have any problem with doing that. I just never got into it. So
awesome.
Yeah, I've never played card games. Partly because I'm so mal-coordinated, I drop all the cards. No, I used to play a lot of D&D, and actually one of the few joys of lockdown, I've been getting my children into playing D&D. They're
awesome.
With their granddad actually at the moment, which is really cool. But I've got a bit of an obsession with Warhammer miniatures. I've never played Warhammer in my life, but I've got a bit of obsession with the 40k miniatures, particularly Chaos Marines. I don't really world build, and I don't have magic systems. I just sort of, I don't world build first. I just kind of, it just sort of happens as I'm writing. I just say whatever. If that helps you write, then that's brilliant. If whatever helps you write, that's brilliant. Go with it.
Great answer. Yeah, I totally agree on that. We got another question here. Hi from Brazil, guys. First of all, congratulations on the show. I really appreciate your work, and guidance for new authors is always welcome, since writing is so fantastic but complex too. I wrote a Western novel which for you may be something like The Rancher, the Gunslinger, and the Devil, and now I'm looking towards fantasy. My main problem with writing is when to write. I'm the king of procrastination, and even when my head is full of ideas and scenes and dialogues, I transfer my attention to video games or reading other books. So I'd like to ask you guys, how do you maintain focus, and what time of day do you think it's best for writing? Thanks a bunch for your attention, and please continue this amazing work. And that comes from Gustavo Quadros. Anna, do you want to maybe kick us off? And this can sort of broaden into, I suppose, a general discussion about your writing routine if you choose to take it in that direction.
So I just make myself write. Well, I have 2 days. I work part-time 3 days. I work in an office job 3 days a week. And then I have 2 days of the week, which are my writing days. And before lockdown, I had 2 days a week where I'd commute. I worked 2 days a week in the office and 1 day a week at home. And in those 2 days a week, I was commuting. I get the train into work. So I have time I can write. And if I don't write in that time, that's it for the week. So 2 days. And that is the only time in the week I get to write. So if I don't write in those 2 days, that's it for another week. Gone. And I am now sufficiently invested in my writing that I feel guilty and not right if I don't write in those 2 weeks. So it's just a habit I've trained myself into. And I think that is the main thing. It's basically like everything in life, exercise, anything. If you make yourself do it, it becomes more and more of a habit. It's the really hard thing is that kind of everyone procrastinates. Everyone always finds something else to do. There's that point when you realise you're reading last week's TV guide in some really bizarre kind of.
Just in case you need to time travel back a week earlier and you need to watch
Yes.
something on TV while you're waiting for whoever you're trying to
Yes.
assassinate to walk out of the room.
There's a quote from, I think it's Neil Gaiman or someone, who's something about writing is the thing, the success to writing is when you somehow feel like you'd rather pull your own teeth out than write. You've got to make yourself right.
And you're still right. Yeah.
I had the discipline of, I would write on the train into work in the morning, and when the train got into the station, that was it. And if I didn't take use of that time, it was wasted. But I used to write in the evening rather than watching television, and it is like it's like anything in life, you have to make yourself do it. If you actually, I often say to people, so I knew people who talk about things like they're going to go off on a writing retreat. I had someone really told me this, really the saddest thing I ever heard about writing was someone who told me that when they retired, they were going to write a novel, because when they retired, they were going to go and stay in a writing retreat, and they were going to go and write totally uninterrupted, and it would be wonderful. But they had to wait until they retired.
It's not going to happen.
I know, and you're just like, I mean, before we started recording this, there was a conversation about writing. So writing for me, yes, I was paid to write those 3 books, but it's a hobby. And yeah, I could not do it. It's not like my office job where obviously someone will notice if I don't do it. I could just not do it, but it's a hobby that I've started to make myself to do. Like any hobby, it would be easier sometimes not to do it, just to sit on the sofa with my feet up reading last week's TV guide. And I've just got off my arse and do it. And that's all I can say, really. It just, if you really want to do it, find the time to do it and force yourself to do it. And it does get more and more of a habit the more you do it. It just becomes part of your routine.
And sometimes you don't find out if you really want to do it until you try it. Make yourself try it. Yeah, I mean, just like Anna said, it's different for everyone. I mean, people are on all kinds of schedules. Some people, most first-time writers have other jobs. So that, families, they have other things that they have to take care of. But I read there was one author who said, you have to defend your writing time to the teeth. Because if you don't, it will always be delegated down. It will always not be a priority. So it's like Anna said, it's like working out. If you're going to work out, you've got to set a time and you've got to go do it. But it's going to work better. Some people write much better in the mornings than they do in the afternoons. Some people write better in the evenings. That's when time is good for them too. You want to find a balance between what time you have and when you can carve it out, because you have to carve it out, and when is best for you. Like my brain doesn't work real well late in the evening at night, so I can't write at night. Luckily, with the kind of job that I have, I can write either I either do my day job in the morning and then write in the afternoons, or do my writing in the morning and do my day job in the afternoons, and I have the choice to do that. And I'm going to be starting on a schedule where I have, to make sure that I get that writing time in, I'm going to do it in the morning. It's just going to be the first thing I do every day. And anything else will just have to, after lunch, will just have to get done or not get done and get pushed to the next day.
And actually,
I have to have that schedule. And instead of writing 7 days a week, I'm moving to 5 days a week because of certain circumstances that are changing.
I'd really say to anyone here listening who has child care responsibilities, which I do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't write at weekends because I can't at the moment, because there's just nothing else. It's not fair on my children to do anything other than spend the weekend, because I feel so awful. But so actually the thing you often hear from women particularly is sort of, the guilt. They abandon their children with the children's father or with their parents or whoever to do some writing. And that seems like, they could have been doing something helpful and educational with the children, or they could have been, cleaning the house for the children so it was a better environment, or cooking dinner or whatever. And actually, the inspiration you're giving your children and, hey, mummy's going off to write a book now. And, you know, because writing books is important and writing is important and enjoyable. You know, that's actually the most wonderful bit of childcare, telling your children just bugger off and watch television for a couple of hours because mummy needs to write a book, because that's, you know, writing isn't just this awful thing that your teacher stands over you at work or making you do that you have to do to pass exams and stuff. It's this wonderful thing that adults do that's hugely enjoyable and can sometimes even make some money. You know, think of writing, think of taking some time out for your book and telling your children to sod off so you can write as an incredible piece of childcare. You know, incredible inspiration. You are inspiring your children to go out to be writers as well.
Agreed. That's a great thing to add into.
And you don't need to do the ironing, and it's fine to stick your children in front of the computer for 4 hours, because when they grow up and they have a real love of reading and writing, and that helps them in their career and their life generally, then you can feel proud.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. That's actually a really good point. And yeah, good to get that perspective.
Or you can just write at work all day like Mike does.
Yes. Actually, this next question might appeal to Mike, because Robert asks, is there an unstated agreement between the writer and the reader for the author to finish a series? Or does the author owe the reader nothing but the current book?
Well, let's spin this around. Does the reader owe the author a purchase of a book? If I write a book, if I write the sequel, do they have to buy it? Because if they have to buy it, then I would agree. I have to write it. Then there's a contract. We're both getting something. But if I'm going to write and spend a year writing and editing a book, which is a fucking huge chunk of my life, and then you have the option of like, man, fuck it, I don't feel like reading the next one. How is this fair? Like, why is the responsibility being heaped on Rob to write my next book? I mean, he's stressed enough.
Yeah, I've got that one on its way to you soon.
Yeah,
Great answer.
I gave mine to Rob too. So what the hell?
Dude's busy.
Gave that one to Ben. Whatever.
Anna, what do you think on this subject?
Oh, see, it is really. So yeah, I mean, it is really hard because obviously, I mean, I was contracted to write 3 novels. When I got the book deal for The Empires of Dust, I had written the first book. I had not written the second book or the third book, and I was contractually obliged to write write the other 2 books. And I am very small league that, you know, if I had not written the third book, I assume bad things would have happened. Like people would have started talking about, could they have the money they paid me back, please? And yeah, it is so frustrating when a series isn't finished. It is just, particularly in a genre where a lot of modern fantasy does revolve around things like reveals and that kind of, I mean, not to mention any names when you've set up your first 2 books with all the kind of mystery that will be revealed in book 3, and then you haven't written down book 3. It's not fair. But neither of those authors are ever going to finish those books. Because if either of the authors that we are all referring to were going to finish those damn books, they'd have finished them by now. They are, as far as I can see, they are now in the position that we would be, any of us would be in, if someone suddenly said to us, you know that piece of creative writing homework you have to do when you're at secondary school that you never finished? Can you do it for me now, please? Can you just... I can't even remember what it was about. I would rather read last week's TV guide 5 times. Those books, because they'd have finished them by now. And if they do finish them, they will be so rubbish. Because the authors will be sitting there I have just got to type this enough to finish it. I've just got to get the word count up.
They clearly don't want to write it anymore,
terrible.
so they're being forced to.
I mean, it's so difficult. It's the curse of these series. Again, sort of most, oh my God, there's a lorry manoeuvring outside my door. So if a voice suddenly starts shouting, caution, this vehicle.
It's those authors having sent a lorry assassin to take you out.
But I mean, no, because people didn't used to write great big long series. I mean, look, this is a Moore Cop novel. It's like that thin. It's like, I mean, that's like 1 chapter. Most modern fantasy novels. there must come a point where you're just like, I just don't care anymore. That was actually a wonderful thing. I mean, you just like, I just don't care anymore. This is just, you've written so many words. You must just feel like, I just don't care anymore. So it is really difficult, because I do feel incredibly annoyed that a basic if you're going to set it up a big mystery that's going to be revealed, it is a bit like writing a crime novel and then not writing the final 2 chapters, and it is really annoying. Those books aren't going to be worth reading when they are, if they are ever published, as far as I can see now. Maybe they'll get someone else to
still have hope. I really hope that
I don't.
that's wrong. But yeah, I can totally see that my hope may be misplaced, but I really do hope that I can be proven wrong and that it will be an artistic triumph like we have never seen. But yeah, that's fair enough. I accept what you're saying there.
I love your enthusiasm and your naivete.
Optimism. It won't last. We'll see.
It's
we'll
important
see.
to remember, I say this every episode, well, every group of episodes, that Jed's very young.
Yes, I barely got out of my
Still has
got out of my diapers
What
recently.
Martin needs to do is release a piece of paper which just solves all the wretched conundrums and mysteries. Like, how is it Daenerys is going to have a baby? Who ends up sitting on the Iron Throne? Who are the 3 heads of the dragon? And it just needs to be published in a really nice, shiny cover with some nice pictures. And
One page.
Just a bunch of reveals.
Okay,
It's like, we don't need the chapters, just tell us.
Yes.
Wrap
Yes,
it up.
we just need a couple of bullet points explaining. We just need some bullet points here, just giving us the answers, and then it's like a quiz answer now, really, isn't it? We just need to tell us what the answers are, and then we can all be happy and move on. And if you had a nice cover, that would probably be a bonus.
I'd buy
Those have
it.
some good covers. All right.
Yeah, I know, we don't buy it.
So perhaps last question before we start wrapping up this particular Q&A session. How do you go about handling race, religion, and gender stereotypes in fantasy? Asks Cade Kessler. Who wants to kind of kick this one off?
Oh, geez. My answer will just get me in trouble.
Okay, great. I suppose I have
No, that
picked
was me,
a
like,
somewhat
somebody
heavy
else
question to
probably.
end this episode on, but it is one that I do want to sort of get people's takes on.
You know, they're like, I kind
Oh
of,
God, sorry, I'm going to go and shut the window. Sorry.
Oh, yep, no worries. Go ahead.
I kind of skate between 2 approaches. One is make sure that I offend everyone equally. The other is treat them with respect. Treat them as real people. Their cultures with respect. Don't state. Try to stay away from stereotypes as much as possible, and don't try to play favorites too much. That's kind of what I did. And also try not to state, if you don't know something about a culture or life of a person of a certain race or gender or sexual orientation, or if you don't know, don't state facts about things, and know that even if you do use a stereotype, I've been accused a little bit of stereotyping one of the gay characters in the way he acts. But what I did, I based that character on several of my very best friends who are gay, and I also had them and others in the gay community read those sections and tell me, is this offensive? And they were like, absolutely not. Oh my God, that's me. And luckily, I've had a number of gay readers who love that character. One reader just recently in the last few weeks said, oh my God, this is me in the body of a 300-pound footballer. So that feels pretty good. oddly enough, the criticisms that I've gotten were from people who were not gay. So I found that interesting, or at least had never experienced any of some of the people like my friends in the gay community in Columbus, Ohio, right? So, and this part of the story takes place in Ohio. So it's a fine line, and honestly, you can't please everyone, but
Yeah.
but try to be respectful. Try not to just do stereotypes, and everyone is a complex person, no matter what. So try to stay away from two-dimensional. It's very obvious in a book when you're reading and some of the main characters or whatever are from your culture and race, and they feel much more, or the writer's culture and race, and they feel much more three-dimensional, and then suddenly you run into, a character from another culture, or any other kind of diverse background, and suddenly they're very two-dimensional. I mean, I've read books where it's just like night and day, and that is something you just have to write those characters the same way you write yours, only from a slightly different perspective. For me,
Yeah.
Hannah, do you want to chip in?
Something,
Oh,
sorry,
Mike.
Yeah,
Rob,
so
Dirk said there, write them as you would, characters from your culture. Kind of part of what my approach is, both with sexuality, race, gender, whatever. Entirely, I don't care. I do not give a fuck about anybody's sexual preferences, race. I don't give a shit. It's not interesting to me. But I write the story, and then afterwards, I go through and randomly gender flip people and relationships, and then change nothing. And they come out, I think, more honest. Because now you haven't written, oh, this is a homosexual relationship. You wrote a relationship the way you saw it, and then you flip genders on one of the characters, or both, or not. And if suddenly it seems awkward to you, then I think maybe it's pointing out a
bias you have.
a bias, yeah, a flaw in your approach, or how you're seeing things.
That is a great answer, and I've done that a lot as well. It's interesting you bring that up because, like, at the moment I'm writing an interactive fiction game where the genders of certain characters change depending on certain player choices. And yeah, it's a great exercise in doing exactly what you're having to do. You're basically having to consider your, I suppose, like, inherent assumptions approaching certain things in a way that forces you to write stuff that is hopefully more balanced and more, I suppose, like, equal as a whole. So yeah, that's something I've found very useful as well, just to back you up there.
again, read widely is probably the answer to almost everything. That, again, the more voices you hear, the more disparate voices from outside your own experience you're exposed to, the more you're going to think about other people and other perspectives. So again, which is also kind of why sometimes I think reading outside the genre is really important, because let's face it, you probably are going to be exposed to a wider range of different cultural backgrounds and life experiences if you're reading outside the genre, because the genre can be quite narrow in its authorship. It's just something that we're all having to live with and accept and trying to get the genre widened out. It's important. That's one of the reasons why it's important to widen the genre, widen the kind of authorship we have in the genre. But yeah, read really widely and just think, and also think. So think about things like, so even if you think you're writing colorblind or genderblind, as it were. So there was a thing recently, there's a book called Sally Rooney's book, Normal People, which is about it's not a fantasy novel, it's a novel about two young people in Ireland who have a relationship. It is literally just about normal people. And when the BBC did a television adaptation of it, and they decided they would cast colorblind. Unfortunately, because no one was thinking about who are we casting for the character, they were thinking about, well, we're going to try and cast a diverse cast to represent, obviously to reflect modern Ireland as a diverse country. But they didn't think about who they'd cast in each particular role, and what they discovered afterwards was totally without thinking. The two protagonists were white, which they probably had to be because the two protagonists in the book were white, and it would have been slightly, but they somehow managed to cast people of Afro-Caribbean heritage as the three most antagonistic characters in the book. Not because anyone had ever at any point gone out and thinking, oh, we need to cast the three bad people as black, but because they thought, we will cast this colorblind. It had just happened, as it were. Now that's the kind of thing, it was not in any way intentional. It was actually started off from the very best of intentions. But it had this really unfortunate kind of, all the bad characters are dark skinned, and the two kind of positive, the hero and the heroine are both white. And it's that just thinking, not just thinking about basic things like, are all my characters white? Because that, you should be way beyond that now. If anyone is looking at that book and thinking, oh my God, I wonder if maybe I should introduce one person who isn't white skinned, but one person who's gay, or one person who has some kind of disability, we should not be having this conversation. We should be having a totally separate conversation about what world do you live in. But it's thinking more than that. Have I created a really good, really cool, convincing, well-written, rounded character who's from a different culture to me? But are they the baddie? Could they maybe not be the baddie? Or are they the witty sidekick who dies in book 2? And then we feel very sad, but they're dead. And then, it's thinking about that kind of assumption, looking at what you've actually done and thinking about that kind of, what is this character? Why am I just being diverse for the sake? Am I just being diverse for the sake of being diverse? Because that will show in your book. If you are just thinking, oh my God, I suppose I'd probably better put in someone who's gay and have a little stuff about how they're in a gay relationship, but actually nothing ever happens to them, or they die tragically, or they're actually the baddie. That was probably, thinking about actually why you've done stuff. And what really, really irritates me now is the kind of, well, this is a sort of fantasy novel set in a version of the Middle Ages. So it's only right that all the powerful characters are white, and we have a couple of characters who are black slaves or something. Well, that, one, you're not writing history, you're writing fantasy. 2, that's not actually, if you're writing history, that would be totally historically inaccurate. So don't give me that. Just write a properly, fully diverse world that represents the world as it is now. And in fact, the world as it always had. The world, if you're writing European fantasy, actually Europe has always been hugely diverse. And it's utterly ludicrous for people to say it wasn't otherwise. Obviously, there were probably smaller number of people from non-white European backgrounds living in Britain, for example, in the Tudor period, but there were. There were quite a, so don't give me that it's that historically inaccurate, because one, it isn't, and also you're writing fantasy. So write a world which is diverse and complicated as the modern world that we live in now, and the world as in fact has always been, and think about why you're doing it, and think about what your characters are doing, and don't accidentally end up with some kind of, well, it accidentally turned out all the characters who weren't white blonde were baddies somehow, because I didn't mean that to happen.
Rob, do you have any last thoughts? Oh, great. Awesome. All right.
Sorry, that was a massive rant, because it's something that really matters to me, actually. It is something that matters to me, that kind of, and it's something that is still so easy. I mean, like the kind of particularly sort of race about kind of things like Islam, or about kind of, not in fact so much about kind of blackness, but about Asianness. If you look at Game of Thrones, I mean, I remember saying to someone how incredibly racist about the East Game of Thrones is, and they were kind of, oh yeah, it does all get a bit Indiana Jones, doesn't it? And as soon as you go to Westeros, it's all kind of weirdo, completely weirdo, deranged people who are shown as being weird and are shown as utterly unconvincing. And you think about all those Eastern cities that Daenerys gets involved with, which are all the most absurd Indiana Jones, Orientalist, racist crap, because the they're never actually racially coded, because we never actually talk about what color their skin is. That's somehow acceptable. And that is something that I find so problematic about the genre. And that we really needs to be dealt with and really needs to be properly confronted.
Fair enough. Well, thanks for your take on that. I think this is a good time to wrap up this episode. So thank you everybody for listening. And if you have any other questions that you would like to send in, again, that email will be in the show notes for this, wizardswarriorswords@gmail.com. Anna, thank you so much for joining us for this episode and for
Thank you,
the
Anna.
episode we recorded as well.
Have I slowly disappeared into darkness? In my screen, I'm sort of becoming increasingly blurred and dark.
It does look like it's a bit darker than when we first started recording. I don't know what's with that.
We'll just
That's
blame Jed.
because
It is getting dark outside.
Yeah, that's because in England it's 20 to 4 and it's a cloudy today in English winter, which means it is getting dark at 20 to 4.
I'm going to blame Jed.
Yes, I have the power to influence the weather in England because I am.
I had not put the
some
light on
magical
when this
dark
began,
lord.
and it is now.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching or listening, and we will see you next
Thanks,
time.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for watching Wizards, Warriors, and Words. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so that we can keep growing this and keep sharing our writing advice with more authors. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.